For the last 3 years during football season, sitting with Amy at Saturday afternoon games had become a habit for Lori. David, of course, was on the team, and while Amy didn't have a steady boyfriend, the guys she dated were almost always football players. By Saturday afternoon, Lori couldn't wait to see Amy. She had to tell her what she'd learned. It had surprised Lori that Amy had gone along with the wave so far, but now Lori was certain that as soon as Amy learned about the boy who was beaten up, she would quickly come to her senses. Besides, Lori sorely needed to talk to her about David. She still couldn't understand how something as dumb as the wave could have made David break up with her. Maybe Amy knew something she didn't know. Perhaps she could even talk to David for her. Lori got to the game just as it was starting. It was by far the best turnout of the year, and it took Lori a moment to spot Amy's head of curly blonde hair in the crowded bleachers. She was way up, almost at the top row. Lori hurried to an aisle and was about to start up when someone yelled, "Stop!" Lori stopped and saw Brad coming toward her. "Oh, hi, Lori, I didn't recognize you from behind," he said. Then he did the wave salute. Lori just stood there without moving. Brad frowned. "Come on, Lori, just give me the salute and you can go up." "What are you talking about, Brad?" "You know, the wave salute." "You mean I can't go up into the stands unless I give the wave salute?" Lori asked. Brad looked around sheepishly. "Well, that's what they decided, Lori." "Who are they?" Lori asked. "The wave, Lori, you know." "Brad, I thought you were the wave." "You're in Mr. Ross's class," Lori said. Brad shrugged. "I know. Look, what's the big deal? Just give me the salute and you can go up." Lori looked up at the crowded stands. "You mean everyone in the stands gave you the salute?" "Well, yeah, in this part of the stands." "Well, I want to go up, and I don't want to give the wave salute," Lori said angrily. "But you can't," Brad replied. "Who says I can't?" Lori asked loudly. Several students near them looked in their direction. Brad blushed. "Look, Lori," he said in a low voice, "just do the stupid salute already." But Lori was adamant. "No, this is ridiculous. Even you know it's ridiculous." Brad squirmed slightly, and then he looked around again and said, "Okay, don't salute. Just go ahead. I don't think anyone's looking." But all at once, Lori didn't want to join the people in the stands. She had no intention of sneaking anywhere to join the wave. This whole thing had just gone insane. Even some of the wave members, like Brad, knew it was insane. "Brad," she said, "why are you doing this if you know it's stupid? Why are you a part of it?" "Look, Lori, I can't talk about it now," Brad said. "The game's starting. I'm supposed to let people into the stands. I got too much to do." "Are you afraid?" Lori asked. "Are you afraid of what the other wave members will do if you don't go along with them?" Brad's mouth opened, but for a few seconds no sounds came out. "I'm not afraid of anyone, Lori," he said finally, "and you better shut your mouth. You know, a lot of people noticed that you weren't at the wave rally yesterday." So what?" "I'm not saying anything, I'm just telling you." Lori was aghast. She wanted to know what he was trying to say, but there was a big play on the field. Brad turned away, and her words were lost in the roar of the crowd. Sunday afternoon, Lori and some of the staff at the Grapevine turned the Saunders living room into a newsroom as they put together a special edition of the paper devoted almost entirely to the wave. Several members of the newspaper were not there, and when Lori asked those present why, they seemed reluctant to answer at first. Then Carl said, "I have a feeling a few of our comrades would prefer not to incur with the wrath of the wave." Lori looked around the room at the other staffers who were nodding in agreement with Carl's assessment. Sniveling, spineless, how do we want to pronounce it? Alex shouted, jumping to his feet and raising his fist above his head. "I pledge to fight the wave until the end. Give me liberty or give me acne." He looked around at the puzzled faces. "Well," he explained, "I figured acne was worse than death." "Sit down, Alex," someone said. Alex sat and the group returned to the job of putting together the newspaper, but Lori could sense that they were all acutely aware of the absent members. The special edition of The Wave would include the story by the anonymous junior and a report Carl had done on the sophomore who'd been beaten up. It turned out that the boy had not been hurt badly, only roughed up by a couple of hoods. There were even some uncertainty over whether it was over the wave or whether the wave was just an excuse the hoods had used to start a fight. However, one of the hoods had called the boy a dirty Jew. The boy's parents told Carl they were keeping him out of school and planned to visit Principal Owens personally Monday morning. There were other interviews with worried parents and concerned teachers, but the most critical article was an editorial Lori had spent most of Saturday writing. It condemned the wave as a dangerous and mindless movement that suppressed freedom of speech and thought and ran against everything the country was founded on. She pointed out that the wave had already begun to do more harm than good. Even with the wave, the Gordon High Gladiators had lost to Clarkstown 42-6. And warned that unless it was stopped, it would do much worse. Carl and Alex said they'd take the paper to the printer first thing by the next morning. The paper would be out by lunchtime. Chapter 14. There was one thing Lori had to do before the paper came out. Monday morning, she had to find Amy and explain to her about the story. She still hoped that as soon as Amy read it, she would see the wave for what it was and change her mind about it. Lori wanted to warn her in advance so she could get out of the wave in case there was trouble. She found Amy in the school library and gave her a copy of the editorial to read. As Amy read, her mouth began to open wider and wider. Finally, she looked up at Lori. "What are you going to do with it?" "I'm publishing it in the paper," Lori said. "But you can't say these things about the wave," Amy said. "Why not?" Lori asked. "They're true. Amy, the wave has become an obsession with everyone. No one is thinking for themselves anymore." "Oh, come on, Lori," Amy said. "You're just upset. You're letting your fight with David get to you." Lori shook her head. "Amy, I'm serious. The wave is hurting people, and everyone's going along with it like a flock of sheep. I can't believe that after reading this, you'd still be a part of it. Don't you see what the wave is? It's everybody forgetting who they are. It's like Night of the Living Dead or something. Why do you want to be a part of it?" "Because it means that nobody is better than anyone else for once," Amy said. "Because ever since we became friends, all I've ever done is try to compete with you and keep up with you. But now I don't feel like I have to have a boyfriend on the football team like you. And if I don't want to, I don't have to get the same grades you get, Lori. For the first time in 3 years, I feel like I don't have to keep up with Lori Saunders and people will still like me." Lori felt chills run down her arms. I always knew you felt that way," she stammered. "I always wanted to talk to you about it." "Don't you know that half the parents in school say to their kids, 'Why can't you be like Lori Saunders?'" Amy asked. "Come on, Lori. The only reason you're against the wave is because it means you're not a princess anymore." Lori was stunned. Even her best friend, someone as smart as Amy, was turning against her because of the wave. It made her angry. "Well, I'm publishing this," she said. Amy only looked up at her and said, "Don't, Lori." But Lori shook her head. "I already have," she said, "and I know what I have to do." Suddenly, it was as if she was a stranger. Amy looked at her watch. "I gotta go," she said, and she walked away, leaving Lori standing alone in the library. Copies of The Grapevine had never been scooped up faster than they were that day. The school was abuzz with the news. Few kids had heard about the sophomore who was beaten up, and of course no one had heard the story by the anonymous junior before. But as soon as those stories appeared in the paper, other stories began to circulate. Stories of threats and abuse directed at kids who, for one reason or another, had resisted the wave. There were other rumors going around too, that teachers and parents had been to Principal Owens' office all morning complaining, and that the school counselors had begun interviewing students. There was an air of unease in the halls and classrooms. In the faculty lounge, Ben Ross put down his copy of The Grapevine and rubbed his temples with his fingers. Suddenly, he'd gotten a terrible headache. Something had gone wrong, and somewhere in his mind, Ross suspected that he was to blame for it. The roughing up of this boy was terrible, unbelievable. How could he justify an experiment that had such effects? He was also surprised to find himself disturbed by the football team's embarrassing defeat by Clarkstown. It seemed odd to him that although he didn't care the least about high school athletics, this defeat would bother him so. Was it because of the wave? During the last week, he had begun to believe that if the football team fared well, it would be a strong argument for the success of the wave. But since when did he want the wave to succeed? The success or failure of the wave was not the point of the experiment. He was supposed to be interested in what his students learned from the wave, not in the wave itself. There was a medicine chest in the faculty lounge, stocked with just about every brand of aspirin and non-aspirin headache remedy that had ever been invented. A friend of his had once remarked that while doctors as a group suffered from the highest incidence of suicide, teachers had to have the highest incidence of headaches. Ben shook 3 tablets from a bottle and headed for the door to get some water. But just as he reached the faculty door, Ben stopped. Outside in the hall, he could hear voices, Norm Schiller's and another male voice he didn't recognize. Someone must have stopped Norm just as he was going into the faculty lounge, and now he stood outside the door talking. Ben listened from inside. No, it wasn't worth a damn, Schiller was saying. Sure, it got them psyched up, made them think they could win, but out on the field they couldn't execute. All the waves in the world didn't mean a thing next to a well-executed quarterback option. There's no substitute for learning the damn game. Ross really had these kids brainwashed, if you ask me, the unidentified man said. I don't know what the hell he thinks he's up to, but I don't like it, and none of the other teachers I've talked to either. Where does he get that right? Don't ask me, Schiller said. The faculty room door began to open, and Ben quickly backed away, pushing through a door into the small faculty bathroom that adjoined the lounge. His heart was pounding rapidly, and his head hurt even more. He swallowed the 3 aspirins and avoided looking at himself in the mirror. Was he afraid of who he might see? A high school history teacher who had accidentally slipped into the role of a dictator? David Collins still couldn't understand it. It didn't make sense to him why everyone hadn't joined the wave in the first place. Then there never would have been these hassles. They all could have functioned as equals, as teammates. People were laughing and saying that the wave didn't help the football team at all on Saturday, but what did they expect? The wave wasn't a miracle drug. The team had known about the wave for exactly 5 days before the game. What had changed was the team spirit and the team attitude. David stood outside on the school lawn with Robert Billings and a bunch of other kids from Mr. Ross's class looking at the grapevine. Lori's story made him feel a little sick. He hadn't heard anything about anyone threatening or hurting anyone, and for all he knew, she and her staff had made it all up. An unsigned letter and a story about a sophomore he'd never heard of. Okay, he was unhappy that Lori refused to be part of the wave, but why couldn't she and the people like her just leave the wave alone? Why did they have to attack it? Robert beside him was getting really upset over Lori's story. These are all lies, he said angrily. She can't be allowed to say these things. It's not that important, David told him. Nobody cares what Lori's writing or what she has to say. Are you kidding? Robert said. Anyone who reads this is going to get the completely wrong idea about the wave. I told her not to publish it, Amy said. Hey, relax, David said. There's no law that says people have to believe in what we're trying to do. But if we can keep making the wave work, they'll see. They'll see all the good things it can do. Yeah, but if we don't watch out, Eric said, these people are going to ruin it for the rest of us. Have you heard the rumors going around today? I heard there are parents and teachers and all kinds of people in Principal Owens' office complaining. Can you believe that? At this rate, no one will get a chance to see what the wave can do. Lori Saunders is a threat, Robert stated bluntly. She must be stopped. David didn't like the sinister tone in Robert's voice. Hey, wait, he began to protest, but Brian cut him off. Don't worry, Robert. David and I can take care of Lori. Right, Dave? David suddenly felt Brian's hand on his shoulder, slowly guiding him away from the rest of the group. Robert was nodding in approval. Look, man, Brian whispered, if anyone can get Lori to stop, you can. Yeah, but I don't like Robert's attitude, David hissed back. It's like we must wipe out anyone who resists us. That's the exact opposite of how we should approach this. Dave, listen, Robert is just a little overenthusiastic sometimes, but you have to admit he has a point. If Lori keeps writing stuff like this, the wave won't have a chance. Just tell her to cool it, Dave. She'll listen to you. I don't know, Brian. Look, we'll wait for her after school tonight, and then you can go talk to her, okay? David nodded reluctantly. I guess.